Thanks for joining us today. My name is Dr. Hannah Torres. I'm the director for the Faculty Research Development Office, and I'll be presenting today with my colleague Hannah Yohalem. And this presentation today is part of the Advance and FRDO Research Success Series. And we're going to be talking about something that's relatively simple, but can be quite high impact when it comes to seeking funding. And that's reaching out to program officers. So this is one of those small steps in the extramural funding process that can really dramatically change how efficiently you pursue funding. So that's what we want to explore today. Next slide, please. So we're grounding this conversation today mainly in NSF, the National Science Foundation, but everything that we're going to be saying also applies pretty well to NIH and other funding agencies. And over the course of this workshop webinar today, we'll talk about why now, because timing is a really important component here. And then we're going to walk through some how-tos in a practical way. We'll talk about when, how, and what to send when you're reaching out to program officers. And then we're going to hear from Anjali Mulchandani about her recent experience working with a program officer to submit an unsolicited funding proposal. And that's going to be hopefully a really useful insight for everyone. Next slide, please. So let's start with the why now. Something that we're hearing, especially around EPSCoR, is that there are still funds that need to be expended or obligated in this fiscal year. The federal fiscal year starts in October. And so a really effective way that people can get these funds obligated is by reaching out to program officers because it allows you to apply for funding outside of typical solicited calls or RFPs. And so it can open up more opportunities. This doesn't mean necessarily easy money, but it does mean that program officers could be more open to conversations around fit with their broader programs. And this creates a window where outreach can be especially strategic. So we're looking at this in terms of both funding and timing with regard to the fiscal year, but also because New Mexico is an EPSCoR state, there's this additional pool of funding that we have more access to than other states. So these are some of the reasons why now is an especially good time to think about reaching out to program officers. Next slide, please. So when you are late in the funding cycle in the fiscal year, it means that there could be less formal competition and more targeted conversations to understand what a program's portfolio looks like and what gaps still need to be filled within a fiscal year. And so reaching out to program officers can either help to encourage submission to their program or reaching out to a program officer might identify alternative mechanisms that could be a better fit. And program officers might also be able to connect you with collaborators or related programs that could be a better fit. But the real goal when you're reaching out to program officers is to really create more efficiency in your extramural funding journey and to help you identify and assess fit with certain programs. Next slide, please. And so let's talk just a little bit about what program officers can do, what they typically do, and what they don't do. So, as I just mentioned, when you're reaching out to a program officer, the most important thing you're going to be able to get from them is to help assess the fit between your idea and their program. They can typically help provide insights into their program's priorities, the review criteria that they're typically looking at. And this is especially valuable when you're looking at unsolicited opportunities that might not have specific criteria listed out because it could have to do with what they've already funded and what they're still looking to fund in the fiscal year. And they can also help to provide some insights into common pitfalls that they see when people apply to their programs. In addition to providing these kinds of insights into their program, they could also, or alternatively, redirect you to other programs that could be a better fit that you might not have ever thought of. Um, or they might direct you to other program officers or directorates that could be a better fit. And then next slide, the things that program officers typically don't do is really give detailed, targeted feedback about your proposal or your idea. They're not going to really edit your proposal or help you design your study. You're very, very unlikely to get them to guarantee you any kind of funding. So if you come away from that conversation and the program officer isn't saying, yes, 100%, submit this and we're going to give you money, that's okay. That's not the goal of reaching out to program officers. They're typically not going to provide detailed coaching about your grantsmanship or the way that you've written your one pager or outreach materials. And they're not going to be able to answer institutional questions about indirect rates or your institutional policies. Those are questions that are better addressed by reaching out to our office, for example, the Research Development Office or the Office of Sponsored Programs. Hannah, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Great. So when do you want to reach out? So in addition to time-sensitive funding, which is sort of the context for why we're doing this webinar right now, it's especially valuable when you have a clear concept, but you haven't committed to a specific opportunity. So you think it might be a good fit for a directorate, but you're not sure, especially if there's any interdisciplinary elements in your project, having that conversation about, is this the right opportunity? Also, if you are trying to figure out if they're even interested in it right now, so sort of a broader test fit before investing in a proposal and team development. And in terms of the timing, that's an important question too. One of the things I think Anjali will talk about is that she was asked to submit very quickly because the directorate was trying to get a review committee in place in the next few weeks. So while we have heard that there is funding available through the end of this fiscal year, which is the end of September for the federal government, they still have to review things before then. And so some of those review committees might have already taken place. So a conversation about like, is it actually likely that they'll be able to get to your project in time? So again, this is why we're emphasizing have those conversations as soon as possible, because hopefully there is still time to do that before the end of this fiscal year. They're less useful if you're trying to workshop your idea, if it's really vague, if you don't have a real project yet, or if you have not reviewed the program or the solicitation. Again, we're talking about unfunded opportunities generally, so it would be reviewing the directorate's goals and priorities, or if there is a solicitation. If you're at that much earlier brainstorming stage, that's something that FRDO can do with you. We're happy to help you sort of hone in on a specific idea or a specific program. You want to have a concrete ask when you reach out to a program officer. So generally, the way they want outreach to happen is a concise professional email first, in which you include some sort of one-pager or abstract or summary of your program. Or your project. We'll talk about that in a minute. A couple targeted questions, like what are you specifically asking? And usually requesting to set up a meeting time and offering some availability. So make it as easy for them as possible. Their job is to help you, but they are also very busy. And as I'm sure you've all heard, there have been cuts at agencies, so they're probably understaffed. So make it as straightforward and direct as possible. We do recommend setting up a call rather than just asking your questions via email because they can be more candid. Again, they're not probably going to tell you everything that's happening at the agency, but it's easier for them. Writing detailed answers to your questions takes time, and also like maybe they can say some things that they wouldn't want to say in writing. And you can ask some questions that you might not want to ask in writing as well. So for the NSF, we recommend it is your project summary, which is one of the required documents for any NSF proposal, which includes an overview of the project, its intellectual merit, and its societal impacts, which used to be called broader impacts, but has been, the NSF is in the process of some language changes around that. It still is sort of what's the bigger picture societal impact. For the NIH, it would be your specific aims page. For other agencies, it could be the abstract. Again, don't make busy work. Try and use something that's part of the required proposal. But you want to be able to communicate. You need the program officer to go into the conversation feeling like they understand what your project is. It does not have to be the final version. Hopefully, you'll get feedback that will change it and adapt it. So don't wait to send it because you're still working on it a little bit. Feel free to send a drafty version. Again, it's to have the conversation to enable them to know what you're trying to do. If you have a BioSketch or short CV ready that you think is relevant, especially to your questions, like if your question is about eligibility or whether you're at the right stage in your career to do a specific project, include it. You don't need to include it if you don't think it's relevant to the conversation. And again, include the program of interest, why you're reaching out to who you are, and roughly what you expect timeline and budget-wise. You want to show that you've done your research and that, again, like you're not reaching out to them to have them tell you what to do, but you have like real concrete questions and have read the relevant documents. The federal agency websites have been updated a lot lately and a lot of names removed, in part because there have been cuts. So start searching on the directorate and program page. There probably will not be specific emails on there. There will probably be a general email address for the whole directorate or program. You can start there. They should be able to redirect you a little bit. An option to try and sort of suss out the specifics to work there might be finding contacts listed in an open solicitation. So even if you're reaching out about an unsolicited opportunity, if you want it for general funding, if that directorate has an open call, all of those solicitations have contact information at the bottom of that. So you should check there. You can also search the awards page, and this link again is to the NSF, but this is true more broadly, and see who is listed as a contact for relevant awards that are similar to what you're proposing. So it's sort of a reverse engineering of who is working on what you want to work on. So again, we've said this in not as much detail, but a little bit more detail of what are you asking? What's the good type of question to ask for in this outreach? So is this a good fit for your program? Is this the type of project you want to be funding? Are there other programs or mechanisms you think I should consider? Again, they're talking to program officers within their agency. They might be okay at suggesting other agencies as well, especially like NSF versus NIH. If you're doing something clinical or medical that's like borderline, NSF might be able to tell you, actually, I think this would be a better fit for NIH. But especially within a specific agency, they're very good and very communicative about what's happening. NIH program officers especially have talked a lot about sharing the specific aims sheet with their colleagues. Question about how is this type of proposal typically evaluated? So again, if you're applying to an unsolicited opportunity to just the directorate, you will follow the PAPG in the case of the NSF or the NIH sort of general application, like R01 application guidelines. Or other general application guidelines for other agencies, which means that the broad merit review criteria apply. So for NSF, again, that will be broader impacts or societal impact and intellectual merit, but you won't have any other specific information. So asking them about how they review is very valuable. If there are any pitfalls you should avoid, if there are things they've been seeing lately or no, um, and what's the most appropriate timeline given funding cycles availability. So again, acknowledging that and I think you can say that you heard that there is funding available within this fiscal year. What's the timeline on that? You can give that context. And then other sort of, again, concrete specific questions, not questions about brainstorming how to change your proposal, but not things that are also listed already in the proposal guidelines. So don't ask about page limits or other things like that. We can help you look those up. So a successful conversation means coming away with greater clarity. So as Hannah Torres mentioned, it does not mean a commitment that your project will be funded. That is an unrealistic expectation. So please don't go into that conversation expecting that. Your hope, best case scenario, you come away with the sense that your project is a strong fit for their program and that the timeline is going to work, that you have time to get a proposal in. You also might get the sense that it's a partial fit. And so then that's a question for you about whether you want to refine your idea to be a better fit or look for something else. And then not a fit. You've saved time. You haven't worked on a proposal that's definitely not going to get funded, and you can redirect. And again, you can also come to FRDO or request support from someone in your department to find a different funding opportunity. So we're going to pass the baton over to Dr. Anjali Mulchandani to talk about her experience. But before we do, I saw there were some questions in the chat that Hannah Torres were answering. Does anyone have any other questions about sort of the introductory materials before we hear about Anjali's experience?
Oh, I don't think we addressed Diana's question. I was just scrolling back and saw that. Asking about when it's best to reach out to a program officer. And we say it's not a great idea to reach out when your idea is too vague. Specifically, when she wants to test an idea, it's by definition at the vague idea stage. So what to do there. And I think that it's okay for it to not be a fully shaped and formulated idea. But I think a good cutoff could be, can you write up a one-pager? Can you articulate what the potential societal impacts and intellectual merit would be for this project, rather than trying to get a general idea out there of, oh, I just want to work with communities. I want to do something about agriculture. If you can articulate some shape of the idea such that you can write up a one-pager, I think that that's probably enough detail to get the conversation going.
I agree. And I think, again, a specific project, which again, could be changed in conversation with them, but you want to come in saying, this is what I think I would be spending the next 3 years working on if it's a 3-year funding mechanism, right? It is something you want to couch it as a grant proposal, even if then you change what you're actually going to do in the next 3 years based on the feedback you get. Great. All right, Anjali.
All right, I am going to share my screen. Oh, I'm going to send a screen share request for you. Perfect. All right, so when Hannah and Hannah asked me to speak, I put together just a list of bullet notes. So it's not a presentation that's very pretty, but hopefully this will help me remember my train of thought as I tell you about my journey that literally all took place over the course of 1.5 weeks. So we'll start with, I had applied to the NSF Career Grant, and I had submitted this in July 2025. prior to that, I had reached out to my program officer maybe in like March, April 2025 to ask about my one pager, and she had given me some feedback, and I had written the proposal, and I got results back in January 2026. And the results said that the proposal was competitive, so not highly competitive, and I got my ratings. So I got those reviews back and I thought, okay, I want to reach out to my program officer. I think at that point in time, I had sent her an email and she had sent me a calendar scheduler. But she only has office hours once a week and sometimes twice a week, and it was always 11 to 12 a.m. on a Monday or a Friday, which is when I was teaching. So I decided, or I emailed her back asking, do you have other time slots? And she never responded. So I kind of completely forgot about that conversation. And then it was mid-March, and I was near Selena Keneally, who is the associate director of EPSCoR, and she said, hey, EPSCoR has unspent money. Do you have anything that you could submit? And I said, well, I just got my career proposal reviews back, and they were pretty positive. And she says, talk to your program officer and see if you could resubmit it as an unsolicited proposal. And in the question that was in the chat, unsolicited for my field, which is environmental engineering, is you can submit it at any point in time, and they'll panel it whenever they have enough proposals ready to panel. So at that point in time, I reached out to my program officer because the calendar link that she had sent me to schedule had run out of times. So there was nothing actually available by like mid-March, April when I reached out. And then at that point in time, I finally found a time slot. And if I look back at my notes, this was April 24th that I finally got a call with her. And just a sidebar on this, and by the way, I'm on bullet 3, I should just highlight as I go. I was later talking to a mentor of mine about this situation, and she said, you should just have had somebody substitute teach your class for you for one day so that you could have talked to your program officer rather than waiting for an hour that you actually had free. And I guess that thought had never crossed my mind because I feel such a responsibility to my students that I didn't think that having somebody else sub for me so I could do something for myself was reasonable. But anyway, I think it was like early April that I finally looked at the calendar and I got a time slot for April 24th. So I get on the call with my program officer and she says, do you have a one pager? Like, what are we discussing? This is a 15-minute Zoom Teams call. And I said, no, actually, I want to discuss my career proposal results. I want to see if there's anything that came up in the panel that you took notes about and whether you think I could resubmit this as an unsolicited proposal. So she looked up the ID number that my proposal had reviewed and she skimmed through the results and she noticed that all the reviewers had the same weakness that they had identified in the proposal. And she said, if you removed that section and replaced it with something else, it could possibly work better in your favor. Because if all the reviewers are pointing out the same weakness, that probably means something. So I asked her about this rumor that I had been hearing about EPSCoR money being unspent. And another sidebar to this, I was working with a group of folks on an EPSCoR FEC proposal, and this was with UNLV and Auburn. And we asked them if they had heard about this unspent EPSCoR money, and neither of those universities had heard about this. So I wanted to know whether it was true or not. And my proposal or program officer said, absolutely, it is true. And she was very favorable of submitting it. But here's the caveat. It was April 24th, and she said, you need to get everything in by May 1st. And the reason for that is that NSF does a 30-day compliance review, which I'd never heard about. She said, if you submit it by May 1st, it can get through that 30-day compliance review, and then she could put it into the June panels. Anything later than May 1st wouldn't get reviewed in June. And she didn't know whether or not she was going to be having a panel after June. The other thing is that my program officer indicated that she was not going to be a program officer for much longer. When I said that I was planning on resubmitting to the career this time, she said, I probably am not going to be the one running that panel. So my guess for this May 1st and submit and panel in June is this is the panel she was running. So she could tell me that this is happening, do it. So then I asked her, okay, now that we know that this is possible, can you give me some more details about the actual proposal numbers and content? Because I'm taking a career proposal, which is different formats and money, and turning it into an unsolicited. So she said, if I have two PIs, we could go for anywhere to $400,000 to $500,000 for 3 years. She didn't indicate that it had to go in under a collaborative proposal with two different universities. She just said, go for it. Have two PIs. And then I asked if a PI is not from an EPSCoR state, will that work? And she said, no, only the UNM budget counts under EPSCoR. So that meant I had to collaborate with another EPSCoR person. And so I went to the person right down the hall, Allison McGoy, who's on this call as well. And I said, Allison, we've been working on this topic together. Do you want to hop on this proposal with me and help me reformulate this third objective into something else? And Allison and I absolutely knocked this thing out in a week, which is kind of wild to me to think about now. So in order for us to qualify for this EPSCoR money, she said that the proposal has to be ranked as competitive in the panel. Now, I had just sat on a panel with this program officer, so I saw how she sorted things out, and I don't know if every program officer does it the same way or not. But every time a proposal is reviewed, the panel collectively decides on a ranking, non-competitive, competitive, highly competitive. And then within the competitive and highly competitive, we rank. So you'll probably have HC1, HC2, highly competitive 1 and 2. And then we had about 4 or 5 that were competitive, C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. And then the program officer decides based on that and what their portfolio is, which of these they're going to fund. So she said to qualify for this EPSCoR money, it needs to be ranked as competitive, but she can pull up something that was ranked low competitive and still fund it. We'll see what'll happen. This was just submitted a month ago. Now, in terms of the broader impacts that we were just talking about, especially since NSF is changing a little bit of their wording, the broader impacts should be focused on societal impacts and the contributions that our topic had to, say, human health. So I'm an environmental engineer, so how does my water topic contribute to health? The career proposal had a hefty chunk of education-related work. For reference, my 15-page proposal was about 4 pages of education work. That then turned into maybe a page and a half of broader impacts. So she said, you can discuss these things, but don't go into that much detail. And then finally, put some money into assessment, but not as much as the career proposal. So you want to have assessment of the outcomes of your project, specifically some of these education outcomes. Now, I will just say that I think I ended up, due to the rush that we had with our proposal, there wasn't enough time to get a letter of commitment from an external evaluator that could then run through OSP. So I ended up saying that I would do the evaluation under one of my existing IRBs. And I'm hoping that that is okay, but I'll let you know. And then finally, one piece of advice that I will just give is to read the PAPG. And I'll admit every time I say PAPG, it just sounds like pap smear, but that's just me. Every time I've submitted an NSF proposal over the last 3 years, something new has happened. They've changed the formatting, they've changed the templates. For example, the data management and sharing plan changed literally 2 days before I submitted this proposal. So for context, I think I need to look at a calendar. I had this call April 24th with my program officer, and she had said you need to submit it by May 1. I think we got an OSP review on the 29th, if I think right. So that's Wednesday, maybe even Thursday the 30th. The NSF changed their data management and sharing plan on April 27th. So 2 days before my proposal was due. And we just winged it. We took the existing plan, went into their new template and tried to copy paste as best as possible. All right, that's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to stop share. I see questions popping up in the chat. So I am happy to answer any questions that people have about the experience or pass it back over to Hannah and Hannah.
Any questions for Anjali? Selena and I were just noting in the chat how you were the first person from UNM to submit with the new data management and sharing plan format. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Happy to
blazing the
be the guinea
trail.
pig. Yes. I will say that my OSP officer was unaware of the change, and the NSF website was not very helpful about how to use the new tool. So we really just hope for the best that we submitted something useful.
Diana. So I don't know 100% the answer to that question. My guess would be no, but that is something just to reach out to your program officer and have the conversation.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
will.
my program officer said that she couldn't guarantee anything if I didn't submit it by May 1st, which made me regret having the call with her so late.
But every program is different. Not all would
Mhm.
necessarily require panel reviews. So it is important to identify your program officer and have that conversation because it's not the same across the board. And to Darcy's point, um, as somewhat of a tangent, we've also been hearing that NSF is really, really encouraging people to submit applications for supplements. If you already have an award, they're really looking to get supplemental funding out there because it's easier to obligate than new awards. So if you have an opportunity to do that, it could be a good bang for the buck.
Yeah, and supplemental per yeah. So
Mhm.
Darcy, feel free to if you are somewhere you can talk if you want to come off mute and talk about your
Yeah,
experience with that.
I had gone through a maybe similar process to Anjali, but just for supplemental funding. And it was
Mhm.
similarly rushed. And I think we also ran into that new compliance period. Uh, but this was all, I think this started like July 1st. They were like, you can't, it was some crazy rush process to get it before the end of last fiscal year. But there was some very, very clear guidance on what is allowed without needing to go through a panel review. So if you're considering a supplemental funding request, look at what that level is right now. I believe it was something like 10%-ish. And then it's up to the program officer and their discretion. But it was, yeah, lots of tight timelines and following exact guidance and having the right conversations at the right time and then scrambling to get things in. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that was like late July-ish last year as they had to obligate everything by like the end of August.
Okay, so yeah, but that is still 2 months
Yeah,
from now.
that's
Still a
still technically not,
scramble.
yeah, something for this year. It's just most places in NSF don't know their budget right now. So if you talk to them right now, you could start that conversation, but they might not be ready to tell you whether it's possible. But the EPSCoR, yeah, it seems like they just know there will be lots of money left.
Thank you. Yeah, and just for those of you who are less familiar, just to be super clear, supplemental funding is for a grant you already have. So you have to already have an award, and often you have to not be in like a no cost extension phase usually. Although again, I think there can be exceptions made. And it can be just general additional funding. Like Joyce was saying, up to like 10%. That is just so like there are additional things we need to do that costing more than we expected. And there also are specific supplemental criteria or supplemental opportunities. So like if you need to add a graduate student, on the slide we have coming up, we talk about grant opportunities for academic liaisons with industry. So if you're trying to like place a student in a internship, there's also supplemental funding if there's like life events that happen. So like if you need to go on family leave and so you need to pay someone to cover some of your work, or a grad student needs to go on family leave for something. So those have specific processes, they still are technically unsolicited. You're still talking to your program officer about them and then submitting usually like a 5-page opportunity. Whereas the like general, I just need additional funding is really in conversation just with your PO. There's not a lot of documentation around the processes. They will then give you instructions.
And just to add on the like this administrative layer, I think we had funding for a grad student, and so did our original grant, but then that also triggered like the new requirements on including a grad student in your proposal. So we had to like hurry up and write a mentoring plan or something like that, right? Like this is sort of a mini proposal that then goes through all the new um whatever PPAG layers there. So yeah, something to think
Yeah,
about budgeting time.
absolutely. Yes, Diana, I'm gonna just send what I have in the chat drafted so that then we can grab some links to guidance on supplemental funding. What I also just sent is a 2023 NSF webinar on a one-pager. So again, for some of these conversations, you might not even need an official one-pager. Especially if it's supplemental, you're already in touch with the PO. They already know about your project, so that you could be much more casual outreach. But if you're doing more formal outreach for a full unsolicited proposal, here are the recommendations, with the caveat that it predates the changes in the broader impacts requirement changes. And then, yeah, we'll grab a link for the supplemental funding guidelines.
And to Svende's question, I'm not sure if the eligibility of individuals would vary by program. There is a section of the PAPG that focuses on eligibility of individuals and organizations, and there doesn't seem to be anything that specifically disqualifies research faculty as opposed to tenure track.
And there are other immediate questions. I will share the slides again. And we're going to go through a couple more like big picture takeaways and then continue to have time for Q&As.
Thank you so much. So just to touch on some common mistakes that we tend to see happen over and over again, these are things that you'd like to avoid as you're reaching out to your program officers. One of the things that we often see is people sending too much detail or too long of a description of their project idea. It really is best to condense your idea down to a one-pager. Think about an overview, the intellectual merit, the potential societal impacts. The format may vary depending on the sponsor that you're talking with, but in general, a one-pager is better than sending, say, a full proposal draft, and it also will save you time. Try to avoid asking vague questions or questions that are answered already in the proposal guidance, because as Hannah Y mentioned, the program officers really are incredibly busy, even though it's their job to help you. It's important to use that time wisely. Try not to wait too long to reach out. It could result in a big rush, more stress than there needs to be. So reach out as early as you can and treat the program officer as a reviewer versus as a guide. They're not going to provide you very detailed feedback. They're not going to tell you specifically what to change in your idea or how to shape your methods, but they can guide you in the right direction. And also try not to ask administrative questions that are already answered in the PAPG. So those are some common mistakes that we often see. And then next slide, one of the things that we wanted to highlight is that NSF does have various proposal types that are listed within their PAPG. And so investigators can submit unsolicited proposals for things other than strictly research proposals. Some of the things that they list in the PAPG are planning proposals or there are these goalie opportunities, which are grant opportunities for academic liaison with industry. This is really a big opportunity now, is to try and enhance those private partnerships because that's a direction that we're seeing a lot. There are conference grants available as well as equipment grants. So think about whether it is a research proposal that's the best fit or whether there are some other types of opportunities that could be a good fit, because these are probably less utilized than the research grant options and could increase your chances of getting funding. So you can look through the PAPG. There are other types listed, and you'll also, again, want to talk to your program officer to see if these specific types of proposals are available through your directorate or program.
I was trying to find it, but couldn't now, but we'll include it in the email out to all of you. We did do a workshop a few years ago. So again, some of the information has changed, but about NSF specific supplementals, including, because yeah, like I think the document I sent didn't have the life event one included on there. So I'll send out that PowerPoint from the earlier presentation. It is not centralized, and again, not every existing grant allows you to add on every type of supplement. So caveats, have the conversation with these are the reasons you have to talk to your program officer, unfortunately.
And as Anjali pointed out, the PAPG changes relatively frequently. So these are some great opportunities worth reaching out right now to your program officer. They might not continue to exist in perpetuity. So be sure to have these conversations and check the PAPG before your conversation.
So Anjali mentioned this. This is mostly just an FYI. You don't need to necessarily talk to your program officer about it, but we wanted you to know about it. Both NSF and also actually NIH have updated and changed their data management and sharing plans. And I think a lot of federal agencies have. This is part of sort of a broader federal push for what they're calling gold standard science and greater transparency, more available information from things that the federal government is funding. So NSF's in particular is a shift away from a like narrative additional document to a structured web form that is within research.gov. So even if you're getting FRSO support, they won't be able to answer the questions for you because they are substantive questions about how you are going to share your data. So that's something to coordinate about, whether you go into research.gov and fill it out yourself or whether you write something up in a Word document that then your support person can help copy and paste into the forms. It is much more specific. They're asking you what data you'll be sharing, where it will be stored, when it will be available. You need to really think it through. Silver lining is these are things you will need to think through later anyway. So hopefully having a strong data management plan now will make things easier at the time of award. The plan itself is a compliance requirement. It becomes part of the award terms as written. So there's less opportunity to revise it later. So again, you sort of have to pre-think about a lot of this stuff. The expectation is very open access to your data. So sharing is the default. You have to justify any limits on availability of the data. The library has done a great job creating a library guide. We will share this link in the chat, and we'll also share the slides that has templates, has examples. You can also make appointments with data management librarians to talk through how you want to do this. There are open access repositories that UNM has, so you're not doing this alone, but it is something that you have to really think through in advance.
And I'm not sure if you said this, Hannah, but something else to consider here is that there could potentially be costs associated with data storage and data management. So it's important to have these conversations early because it may affect the way that you shape your budget and justification and other parts of your proposal as well.
I had not, so thank you for saying that. And this is true also, again, it's not on this slide, but The expectation of like open access publications as well. There is a greater expectation that things get published quickly within like a year of funding, and generally in open access spaces and open access journals have high costs associated with them. So yeah, definitely talk about this with your FRSOs as you're building your budget. There definitely can be costs associated. So just summarizing next steps, again, identify a target program, draft a one-pager or abstract, develop 2 to 3 focus questions, and again, we really encourage you to reach out in the next couple of weeks. I would recommend on the 2 side of that 2 to 4 range, just give yourself the greatest chance of being able to benefit from this extra pot of, or not pot of funding, but this extra priority funding. And we really encourage you to loop in FRDO or your FRSO's request support early. We can also help. And we're happy, the central office especially is really happy to look at a one-pager and give you feedback. But again, this is just a starting point for a conversation, so you don't have to be too precious about it at this point. Are there any other questions at this point?
I would also welcome anybody else's experiences if you've reached out to a program officer and have something different that you could share with the group.
I just want to share the reaching out soon and concisely. The NIH science officer for the UNM FIRST grant shared with us recently that she's gone from supporting 35 grants to 130 with the personnel cuts. And it's no different at NSF. So as much time as possible as you can put quickly into an efficient sort of one pager and communication, that'll be really appreciated. And she says she really appreciates it being very, very clear what the questions are. And she is far more likely to quickly answer the emails where it's really clear what the questions are than if she has to read 3 paragraphs to find out, oh, that was something easy. But she may put off reading the 3 paragraphs because it looks like it's going to be hard.
That's great. And the question can be, do you have time to meet? Right? Like that can be, but yeah, make that very clear that that's the conversation and then go into additional background from there.
And I guess also to Anjali's point, anything you can do to help accommodate. We're all busy, but anything we can do to accommodate their busy schedules would probably be greatly appreciated. So if you're able to get someone to sub for your class, if you're able to make time where you otherwise might not have it, they'd probably recognize that effort.
Well, just so you know what to expect, we'll share the recording. We'll also share the PowerPoint. There are links, so we have some reference material in here. Again, another talking to program officers, one from the NSF, talking to NIH staff, a Chronicle article about it, the library guide from UNM about data management plans as well. And the link I just put in the chat should work, but we'd also love any feedback on this session. And this is part of, I think we said it at the beginning, but the Advance and FRDO Research Success Series. We have started doing some summer sessions given all of the changes at the federal level. We might have one more in July this summer. We will definitely be back in the fall, but we are always happy to hear what you are interested in. If you have questions, if you want to go into more detail about any specific topic, please let us know, and we can create a session around your questions.
And you'll receive the slides, and we'll be posting this recording on the Advance FRDO Diversifying Your Funding Portfolio webpage, and it will be up within a day or two. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.